This is Shravanth Poreddy. We started this association like a week, 10 days back, 10 to 15 days back. My interest, I think everyone speaks Telugu with them. So, first 2014 lo, I had to buy a condo, which is a, so first under Jepte North, I wanted a better view apartment, but the Vastu influence walla under Chepatantone, I had to go for a northeast apartment. In 2 days, I changed my mind, and then I wanted to go back to that like manchi view apartment kosam velte. It got booked on my book. I paid 2 days lone. None of the apartments were booked in 3 months. I wanted to change my mind, and then I wanted to go for a better view apartment. In 2 days, I book. Then I thought it is not loss because of Vastu influence walla. So people should not get under this influence, and I say they have to choose their own options. And I say I started an association, like a group set of group. We did one event under Janavijnana USA. And then we later on, we wanted to bring Babu, and then we were loose virtual 100 people. They had the same mindset and like-minded people. Then we started this association, South Asian Humanist Association. It got launched on May 30th in Dallas. So now we are all on this, all like-minded people. So we wanted to gather and then see, what rational thinking is and everything. So before that, I would like to introduce Prashant Garu, Ramesh Atsmaldi, Madhav, and Suresh. We all met together and event Cheddamo and we decided. And Surya is also a volunteer, and Srikanth Tumara is also a volunteer. And I want everyone to be a volunteer and then take this forward. So it is not one person can do this job, so everyone have to give a lending hand. Thank you.
Ramesh? No. Hello, Prashant Pusanagari. It's not that I am a very big rational thinker or a humanist. Babu Gari, for the last 2-3 years, I was started watching. When everybody is going for Vastu, and let's see, put some science behind everything. Whether it is a Vastu or any other religion, things, cultures we are following. If it is something good, I will try to follow if it is useful. లేదు అనవసరంగా ఏదో తెలియకుండా ఎవరో పెద్దవాళ్ళు చెప్పేసారు జస్ట్ బ్లైండ్గా ఫాలో అంటే నో ఐ డోంట్ వాంట్ దట్. ఐ ట్రై టు టెల్ పీపుల్, ఇన్ఫ్లుయెన్స్ పీపుల్ హౌ మచ్ ఎవర్ ఐ క్యాన్. బట్ యాజ్ ఎ స్మాల్ పర్సన్ ఇట్స్ నాట్ ఈజీ. సో అండ్ వాట్ ఈస్ సమ్ పీపుల్ అగ్రీ విత్ అస్, కానీ బయటికి రావడానికి భయపడుతున్నారు. మా ఇల్లు వాస్తు ప్రకారం కొన్నాని ఎంత గర్వంగా చెప్పుకుంటున్నారో, వాస్తు లేకుంటే చెప్పడానికి భయపడుతున్నారు. వాస్తు లేదంటే ఎవరేమంటారో అనేది భయం, అనవసరం. ఈ భయాలు ఎక్కువైపోయాయి. మోర్ దాన్ భక్తి, భయంతో దే ఆర్ స్టార్టెడ్ ఫాలోయింగ్ థింగ్స్. సో జస్ట్ వాంట్ టు గెట్ దిస్ అవేర్నెస్ ఇన్ ద పీపుల్. అది ఏం అంత భయపడాల్సిన అవసరం లేదు. లెట్స్ సీ వాట్ హ్యాపెన్స్, లెట్స్ పుట్ సైన్స్ బిహైండ్ ఇట్. సో మనలాంటి వాళ్ళు చెప్తే ఇట్ ఈస్ అంత ఎఫెక్ట్ ఉండదు. సో ఇఫ్ the same thing is being said by the right person who has traveled the world, who has seen the different people. So alane we got influenced by Babu Garu, and especially Babu Garu, the RK interview, I felt I forwarded that to many people, and I think a lot of people started understanding this. So that's when okay, Babu Garu vastunar US kante we felt very good. Okay, if he says something, then it will be more value. I know some people, though they want to come, I couldn't pull them in here, but we want to record it and play it to them. Let them watch it, let them go see the science. And it's a rational thinking more than anything else. We don't want to force anybody, we don't want to say they are bad or they are good. It's nothing to fight with anybody. We only say what we feel is right. If somebody gets rationally influenced, we are more than happy to help them in that direction. So we are very fortunate. Babu Garu New Jersey ki raavadam, US ki raavadam, New Jersey ki raavadam. So we thought it's a very good opportunity for all of us to meet and listen from the lion's mouth. Thank you, Babu Garu, for coming here, and please.
Thank you, Andy. It's a great pleasure and honor to have anyone join to discuss some of the important questions that really should engage the minds of people. But for some reasons, it is not so. So very often, discussions about democracy, humanism, rationalism appear to be uninteresting to most people. However, that is what will decide where our societies will go and how we shall conduct ourselves. As a very simple example, India and Pakistan started on their separate journeys together, a few hours away from each other. And we know where Pakistan is, and we know where India has been these last several decades. And we should recognize the role that a secular structure has played in preserving the little that we have in the country, and to recognize what it is that happened in Pakistan that made Pakistan a hell, a living hell today. Such a question is best addressed by talking about secularism. This is a much abused word. This is a word, I will try to get that display on. This is a word that has been subject to, is a microphone already?
It's very clear. It's very clear.
So what's the format of the discussion? Is it interactive, or do you want to go through the slides and wait till the end for questions?
I think it's best that at least go through half of it. Otherwise, the questions will not relate to what I have said. So we'll keep it that way. So really, secularism is a word that has been misunderstood, misinterpreted, and misused throughout the story of India. And the great danger that lies ahead of us is that if we continue this way, we shall not be immune to the fate that Pakistan has seen. This has nothing to do with simply the religion that we want to associate the state with, but the very function of associating a religion with the state, whichever religion, will result in great difficulties and serious disasters. So my intention in talking about a wall for our republics, which is what we said would be the title of today's talk, is inspired by the great President of the United States, Jefferson. Now, you had Washington, and then John Adams, and then came Jefferson. And Jefferson was very different to the previous two great presidents that this country had seen. In 1801, from Connecticut, the Danbury Baptists wrote a letter to Jefferson, and they said, we are a minority, and it seems as if people are doing us a favor when we are allowed to practice our religion, whereas it ought to be our inalienable right. And Jefferson, in 1802, replied to them, thanking them for the congratulations he received from the Baptists, but also telling them that it is not thought but action that government will be concerned about, and said very clearly that between the church and the state there must be a wall of separation. Now, this wall of separation is a principle that is well reflected in the Establishment Clause in the United States. Visiting you in the US, I do not have to say much about the Establishment Clause because you would be familiar with it. That Congress shall not either promote or stop the establishment of a religion. And later, jurisprudence, judgments of the courts have also said that the state shall not unnecessarily interfere in the affairs of religion, and the state shall keep a distance from all. So the Establishment Clause is a very important achievement in the democratic structures that we have to create in societies which are plural. Even if the society is not plural, it's a very important thing to have. Now, such a separation has been, in the case of the United States, referred to as the Establishment Clause or the First Amendment and so on. In other parts of the world, people have used the word secularism. In France and in the Francophone countries, the word laïcité, that has been used to demonstrate what you mean by a relation between church and state, temple and state, the mosque and the state, or the lack of relation. We shall look into that a little carefully. For the youngsters, I think this may take you through some boring detail. I'm sorry about that, but later when we'll come to a bit of science, that might be of some interest. But if we don't sort this out, we will come to a situation where we will not be taught science in schools. If we do not have a secular structure, then the first victim of that situation will be that science is kicked out. Already we know from the time of the Scopes trial, you would be familiar with that, the monkey trial where creationism was supposed to be the only biology lesson that should be taught nearly 90 years ago now. And the great trial that took place in the United States, that is because there was no clear secularism. There was no clear separation of religion or state. But as I said, across the countries, across the continents, over the years, the word secularism has been understood in various ways. So let's start with looking at historically what it meant to people. Now here is a guy called Holyoake. Now Holyoake is a fascinating character from the history of the United Kingdom. And Holyoake was the one who first proposed the word. So before that, the concept existed, but the word did not. Now, what did he mean by the word secularism? Now, he said it's really the extension of free thought to the domain of ethics. Now, it's very different to what we talk about when we say secularism, especially in the Indian subcontinent. He is saying free thinking in morality and ethics, meaning your morality should not be derived from a prophet, a revelation, or a holy book. That you should be free thinking. And that is what he proposed his word should mean. In fact, in the modern world today, the same idea is referred to as humanism. That the humanist is the one who does not require a God to explain the universe, and does not require a God or a religion or a revelation or a prophet or a holy book to tell us what is right and what is wrong. So, the judgment of what is ethically correct, what is morally acceptable, has to be done on the basis of reason, on the basis of our own critical intelligence, rather than accepting what somebody else has said. So, over 100 odd years, the word secularism is now replaced by the word humanism to refer to that idea. And it's a clarification there. Secularism maintains a sufficiency of secular reason for guidance in human duties. So it's really ethics that they are talking about, not about separation of religion and state, which would be what I started with and the main focus of our discussion. secularism, along with the word humanism and science, for the English language, were introduced in the 1850s. Now, isn't that interesting? That the world moved on to a different phase, that Darwin proposed the idea that there is evolution, but not just the idea, because the idea was proposed much before Darwin by many people. But here was one who gave absolute, irrefutable evidence to show that the human life that we see and all other life forms that we see can be traced back to its origin in a unicellular organism. Since Darwin's death, since the proposals and the understanding of gene and chromosomes and the DNA and so on, we now know, of course, that we are not unsure, but we are very sure about the real role of evolution in understanding where we are today as a life form. So, science, earlier, all pursuit of knowledge and all knowledge was referred to in the English language based on Latin as philosophy. But today we understand philosophy differently. And the word philosophy was replaced by science. Why do I tell you all this? I tell you all this to say that words keep changing their meanings, and a dictionary is a good guide for us. And we should know what we mean by a word when we use it. People really very often use words so loosely that it confuses everyone. You know the famous quotation and the dialogue in Alice in Wonderland, where a character says, I shall use a word the way I want. Now, we can't do it, because we are not in Wonderland. We are in the physical world, and we are trying to define some concepts, not simply handle words. Now, what Holyoake also said secularism was that science should be the true guide, meaning not religion, but science. And then he said morality should be secular, which means being good or being bad should not be decided by a god or a religion. It should be the humans who should discuss, dialogue, debate, and see if a particular code of conduct can or will lead to something beneficial to all, in which case it's good. If it is not, then it has to be discarded. And reason as the only authority, meaning not revelation, not claiming that God spoke to you on a hot summer day when nobody else was listening, or saying that you found this as an answer, but you will not tell others where you got it from, right? That could be either the revelation of a holy book or the giving of the 10 commandments to you behind a burning bush, or the revelation of the holy books as things that you heard and which humans can never write down. You can put names of religions to what I said. Those are the claims of the majority religions of the world, the major religions of the world today. Now, as I clarified, what was proposed as secularism in the 1800s is really what we mean by humanism today. And then, of course, secularism is such a nice word. Everyone says he or she is a secularist. You'll find hardly anyone who refuses to use that term. It's a bit like applehood, apple pie and motherhood. Nobody says apple pie is bad, nobody says motherhood is bad, but they don't really know what they are talking about. Or people just feel good about it without defining it. An example is, for example, the Pope. Now, I think when I say Pope, you will immediately think of the guy whose headquarters is in the Vatican. But there's not one single Pope, there are many Popes in the world. He is the most famous of those. There are popes in Russia, there are Orthodox popes, you'll find them in Syria, and you'll find them elsewhere. but the one we know a lot about is the Pope of the Catholic Church. And he said that Christianity is a humanism. But that's not what humanism means in the regular usage of the word. Similarly, in India, the Bharatiya Janata Party talks about positive secularism, meaning that those who do not agree with its philosophy have a negative secularism. So these are words with adjectives which lead us to an area where it's not clear to us anymore what we mean by the word. And this is the question I keep asking. They say, oh, the word is not clear, you're just confusing us, so we don't want to use it. The same argument can be addressed to those who talk of religion, because you can't find a universally accepted definition for religion either. When you say to someone, what is religion? They will come up with as many answers as people in a room, because they all have their own idea of what it is. But when we talk about secularism, we also talk of political principles, which means it's not open for everyone to define it the way they want. When we talk of secularism, it's a principle, and we have to put that effort to define it well. As I said to you, the BJP calls it positive secularism. The Congress party, the Congress Party I of Indira Gandhi, they keep saying that they are secular. But if secularism is really separation of religion or state, can the Congress Party be called secular? That's a question we have to ask, because this is what the Congress Party promised to the people of various states. In Nagaland, the late Rajiv Gandhi, when he was doing a campaign, election campaign, promised to them that he would give them Christian rule. And of course in the Punjab, the offer of a Khalsa Raj was made again by the Congress Party. And most of us are from Andhra Pradesh, and you know that Y.S. Rajshekar Reddy promised Devudi Palana, God rule, the rule of God. So it would be a little rich for somebody who is doing all this, Christian rule in Nagaland, Sikh rule in Punjab, God's rule in Andhra Pradesh. Why not God's rule in Uttar Pradesh? Why not in Delhi? Why not? And so on and so forth. To say that they are secular. And then there is the other confusion that has been brought into secularism, because the philosopher president of India, Radhakrishnan, he said that secularism is equal respect to all. Now, how can you have equal respect to all religions? In what way can you do that? Especially when religion has very little respect for the human. There is a problem there. And we shall come to that later. And then there are people from the minority communities, like Asghar Ali Engineer. It's very comic. He was a very respected Muslim scholar. He died a few years ago. And he was the one who was speaking about a kind of liberal Islam without being very sure about what it could be. And he said Islam is the basis and can be the basis of a secularism. Actually, he's completely wrong, even by theology, because Islam does not believe in a secular system. What Islam wants is a rule according to the dictates of the Holy Book and what the Prophet said and the practices of the early area, time-wise, when Islam was proposed to the people of Arabia. That cannot lead us to any secularism. So I'd like to ask, if Islam is the basis and the Quran is the basis of a secular system, then in Afghanistan, in Iran, and in many other countries in that region, Saudi Arabia, they say that their rule is based on the Quran. In which case they must all be secular, is it not? But they are not. And any country can be called secular, like any country can be called republic, people's republic, and a democracy. We know that China calls itself a People's Republic of China. We know that Korea, North Korea also calls itself democratic. So we should not be allowing us to be misled by these terms again. Now, Albania, from where the late Mother Teresa came to India, there being religious was illegal. You could not be religious in that country. Then in all the former communist republics, having a religion was not something welcomed by the authorities. And then of course, Kemal Pasha, the Grey Wolf, who defeated the caliphs, because like the Muslims, like the Christians have the popes, the Muslims had the Khalifa. And the Khalifa was defeated by Kemal Pasha, who made Turkey a secular country. And then he said you could not wear the fez topi because that would be Islamic. It was Jawaharlal Nehru who made the interesting comment saying, are we worried about what is on the head or what is inside the head? Asking people to be careful about how much of who you will regulate. That would also be the domain of secularism. We shall skip this part. This is simply the misuse of words as republics and as democracies and so on. Right. Now, what is the interest many of us have in the idea of secular? The idea of secular is a guarantor for a secular, successful democracy. Anything that we call a religious democracy is not a real democracy. We shall come to that a bit later. I have mentioned to you already that the word secularism has its not equivalent but parallels in the French system where it is called laïque, and then you also have the developments that took place in the communist countries. Where do we find the ideas behind secularism in the world? We already had a chance to discuss that. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution is a firm guarantor, and for the last 200 odd years, it has been defending the separation, strict separation of religion and state. And I shall have occasion to later refer to, there is also what is called the Lemon Test. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. The Lemon Test is a fantastic thing. I will come to that. The French law, it's over 100 years old now. They wanted a clear separation of religion and state, and they started taxing the property of religious institutions. Because many religions have tax exemption status. Why should that be? If you do not exempt tax from being paid for other people, what is it that a religious group is doing that it makes it possible for them not to pay taxes? It's a question we have to ask ourselves. And if you look at the list of the countries where secularism exists, you will see that many very important countries of the world have the idea secular enshrined in their constitutions. But it poses problems as well. The kind of problems that Kemal Pasha posed to the citizens of Turkey when he said you could not wear the face cap. Now, why should I not wear the face cap? Just because Muslims are wearing it, I can't wear it? Or, as is being asked today in Algeria or in Egypt or in many other countries, including in Western countries, why should I not wear a burqa? I'm doing it out of choice. This is my way of dressing. And these are not that easy to answer, because you're saying it's not religion telling you, this is the dress you've decided to wear, and why should the state interfere with it? The cases of interference by the state usually happen when you are an employee of the state, when you are a teacher in a school, or when you are a police officer, where the citizens are expecting you to be neutral. You can't be really that neutral if you already have decked yourself up with a lot of religious symbolism. So that's a discussion that is actively going on in Europe, for example.
I mean, just a question. Suppose if you don't wear clothes, I mean, is it secular or non-secular? I mean, I don't know whether.
If you're not wearing clothes, it's simply being naked. I don't know.
No, I mean, is it kind of, I mean, I don't understand because in the Canada, a few years, 10 years before, they are allowed, women are allowed to, without,
Yes, in a beach or on the street.
even in the street, I believe, I don't know, 10 years before. But later on, they stopped that. I mean, they regulated it. I mean, there's nothing to do with religious, but
I think there are also issues of decency, and there are secondary sexual characteristics and primary sexual characteristics. It would be reasonable to tell people that exposure of one's primary or secondary sexual organs is not something you can do in a place where people of all ages are. You
so
can have consent.
In this case, all religions agree that it is not good, but in Muslim cases, it's very peculiar. They are enforcing their own, very ridiculous way, with other religions really don't care about it.
And what is happening is, to my understanding, is that the way we dress or not dress is a belief in itself. So which one is right? Which one is more secular, or which one is that we should believe?
I don't think actually dress is connected to secularism or religion.
It's an example.
But,
things are there.
but dress codes are imposed by religions. There is a difference. How I choose to wear what really is a function of what I want to do that day. But in some cases, and here we are talking not of preferences but of human rights. In some cases, a religion will impose a dress code on you. And there, the state would have to intervene, saying, if you don't want to do it, you should have the ability, the liberty, the possibility to exercise your choice. These are actually not simple questions because, as you pointed out, there will be people who will say, that's something I would like to do. And if religion has not had an opinion about it, the state will, in terms of decency. So you would do it on the beach, but you would not do it where children are around, for example. And so on and so forth. But the main thrust of the thing is that how much the state can interfere in the lives of people and in the thoughts of people is a very delicate line that needs to be negotiated carefully. If you look at what...
one thing I would ask, because I don't know about India, but in the United States, as I see it, like you can have any number of religions, as I said before, you can create and destroy, but as long as you don't break the existing state rules, that's fine. If you break existing, no religion can break the whatever existing state rules, but you can have unlimited of a number of religions you can create, or whatever domain of the things you have. But if I think in United States it's well regulated, because I see one of the clerk not granting for a homosexual something, he was jailed. So in that case, the court has taken a position that. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, we'll come back to the question. I think during the discussion we would have a chance to address that. Now look at what Mustafa Kemal Pasha did. And strangely, Gandhiji was against what Mustafa Kemal Pasha did. And those of us who did a bit of Indian history know that Gandhiji was supporting the Khilafat movement, the Khalifas movement. That the supreme head of the Muslim nation, which means all the people, all the Muslims around the world, should have a leader, a king, and he wanted that king to be brought back. So Gandhiji made this serious mistake of supporting the call for the Khalif to come back and head the Muslims by being based in Turkey. However, what Kemal Pasha did is very interesting. Look at it. Now, he got in the Swiss civil code. So the civil code was from Switzerland, but the penal code was from Italy. And then the commercial code was from Germany. And that is what replaced the prevailing Shariat that existed within the Khalifa rule. And then he abolished polygamy. So a man could not have more than one wife anymore. Of course, polygamy prohibits the other way as well, that a woman cannot have more than one husband. But that's a theoretical possibility in Islam, because the real active thing is that a man would have many wives. And the burqa was banned. You could not use a burqa anymore. He did a lot of things to completely shake up the way Islamic society was operating during that time, in his country mainly, but it had its after effects, aftershocks elsewhere too. Now, he also abolished the triple talaq. This is what is very interesting about Kemal Pasha. You know that the triple talaq exists still in India.
Yeah.
Do you know that it does not exist in Pakistan? The Islamic Republic of Pakistan has no triple talaq. But the secular Republic of India allows triple talaq. That gives you an idea that some countries refuse to progress, and that is because they have compromised on the principles of human rights. It's not simply religion, because in Iran you cannot have a triple talaq. But in India you can, in the secular nation. Right. But the reason I mentioned the triple talaq is to talk about Kemal Pasha himself. He's quite a naughty fellow he was. He first divorced his wife with the triple talaq, and then he abolished it. So he was quite smart. Now, as you see there, it's in February 1926 that he got the new law abolishing the triple talaq, but already several months before that, he said goodbye to his wife. And then all the religious houses, the religious properties were nationalized. They were asked to give back the money they were given by the state as grants. Something like what Mexico did. So the relation of the state with religion has not always been one of welcoming it. Very often it defended the fierce independence of the state and kept religion away. Sometimes it even taxed them, and oftentimes it even appropriated the property of the church. You would probably remember the debate that happened with the Ananta Padmanabha Swami temple in Kerala. They said there's 1 lakh crores or more worth of ornaments in the treasury of that temple. So the question was, who should this money go to? Really, it depends on who that property originally belonged to. That would have originally belonged to the state. Now, what happened to the properties of all the royal families and the countries, kingdoms which got absorbed into the Union of India at the time of independence and in the period that followed it? The properties of those states became properties of the nation of India. It did not go to a temple, or it did not remain with the family. And even privy purses were abolished in the 70s by Indira Gandhi. So the logic would be that, like Kemal Pasha did then, Ananta Padmanabha Swami temple treasures would belong to the state of India, to the Indian state. It would be part of the national wealth. It would be part of the national heritage, because some of it is actually stuff of antiquity. Right. Now, I already mentioned to you the great Jefferson and his principle of the separation of religion and state. I also referred to you the Lemon test. I had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Lemon. Mr. Lemon was the one who went to court because he felt that his First Amendment rights were being violated by the state he was living in. And then the court came up with these principles, that a law must have a legitimate secular purpose. It's an important principle, that there must be a legitimate secular purpose. And then it must not have the primary effect of advocating, promoting any particular religion or stopping it. Now, very often we forget the other side. Religion should not be stopped either. It should not be helped. It should not be prevented or hindered. The obvious caveat remains that you would do it so long as religion does not interfere with human rights of others. This is a stance we repeatedly as humanists say everywhere whenever there is an opportunity, that humanists are not against religion. But when religion is against the human, we are against religion. Because it's no longer a personal pursuit of the truth and spirituality and the advancement of mankind and womankind. It is an interference with the achievements of civilization. When you deny the equality of women or the equal dignity of all, and then you say that you are born into a caste which comes with its privileges but also its penalties. So the principle of humanism is not to interfere with religion, which is also the principle of secularism, nor support it because it's a personal choice. It is also a community choice. 100 people believing in the same thing could have their place of prayer, and that is fine. But that cannot be an activity aimed at destroying the very basis on which this freedom is founded. So you can't have a religion which is then going to destroy democracy, which is what has been happening in the Islamic countries. If you see the story of Algeria, if you see the story of Turkey, the same Turkey which was made secular 100 years ago is completely in the right-wing basket now, and on the way to becoming a basket case soon. Algeria, there too, people voted to end democracy once and for all. So the mechanism of the Islamists coming to power was a mechanism of democracy. It does not make it legitimate, because the consequence of that process is a destruction of that very freedom that made it possible for them to be elected. So this we must be very clear. If we are not, then we come to a situation where Hitler was elected. You know, Hitler did not just become a dictator. His party came to power. His party came to power. He was supported by the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church also published posters supporting the candidature of the Nazi party, the Nationalsozialismus party. And then he became a dictator. So it's not simply the mechanism of voting that decides whether something is democratic, but the principles that there are behind that mechanism. And what principles does this mechanism advance? We have to be clear about that. So majoritarianism is not the same as a democracy. That's the fundamental thing. Just because a lot of people have voted for something does not make it necessarily democratic. And then there must be no entanglement. The entanglement of religion with the state and the government is nothing that can be encouraged. The Lemon Test has done a good job of keeping American secularism fairly untouched by the craziness of religious groups being developed now. For example, some people will say they will not get their children treated for medical illness because that is their belief. It cannot be accepted. Because parents have a duty of care. They do not have absolute rights on children. They cannot do whatever they want, even defeating the welfare of the children. So those are checks and balances that there are. Now, if we go further on, the French, and this is an extremely important development. If you look at the story of how relations between religion and state developed, you will see that over time in Europe, the Catholic Church was the overarching power in the continent. So the church decided everything. It is by the dictates of the church that all of society conducted itself. To the extent that if the Pope said something, that would be the law, and those who disagreed could be killed. The Pope decided through the censorship list, the index that they created, that they published, which book citizens could read and which book you could not read. This was all very clear. Now what happens later? What happens later is somebody like Napoleon comes to power. Now this short man, who was not even French, he was not born French, he was born outside France, comes to power, and what does he do? He establishes a dictatorship. And what does he do next? He declares himself emperor. Now, he wanted some legitimacy from the Pope. So he invited the Pope to his crowning. And the Pope was not very sure. You probably do know that for a long time, the Catholic Church's Pope lived in France and not in the Vatican. The Vatican is a much later development. So this guy had his office set up in the south of France, in the city called Avignon. And Napoleon more or less invited him to come to the ceremony of coronation, and the Pope was not that sure. So Napoleon sent him a message, "Are you coming, or shall I come and get you here?" So this guy got scared, and then he came running. So the Pope and his power was already reduced by the time Napoleon was there. So Napoleon got the Pope to sit in the front row, took the crown, put it on his own head, and said, "Clap." So the Pope had no role anymore in these big matters. What is the grand development that took place? The state was once part of the church. What the political authorities did was decided by the church. So you had the church, in that was the state. By the time Napoleon came, and consequent to that, the state was the overarching thing, and the church became a part of it. So the state in the church turned into the church in the state, which by 1905 led to a clear separation of both religion and state. These are very important developments. We are not taking the time to understand how these countries managed to create more liberties for their citizens in their countries. They have done it by pushing the limits of religion to the private sphere, taking it away from the public. And that has led to an expanded freedom for all. Because religion comes with its taboos and its threats, and many of those threats are what will happen to you after you die, but very often it's also about what will happen to you while you're alive. And the story of all countries where religion is deciding what citizens should do is exactly that. Now, laicity is almost the same as what principles we discussed, and that is so that the state and the church are kept separate with the objective that the state is safe from the church or religion, and that religion is also safe from the country's political establishment. So neither will influence or interfere with the others. This is a cardinal principle of a secular system. And if you now look at India and how we are there, you will see that whatever name they give to the system, it is the farthest away possible from the idea of secularism itself. The state is excessively entangled with religion, the state promotes superstition, the state regulates religion, the state is in charge of temples, the state has boards which look after mosques, and so on and so forth. So there is a problem with the way we work with the idea of secularism in our country. I want to tell you what happened with Charles Bradlaugh. Bradlaugh was a fantastic guy. Much before anybody spoke about independence for India, here was this man talking about independence for India in the 1800s. What happens with Charles Bradlaugh? He's an atheist. He ran for election, he got elected as Member of Parliament. Now you go to Parliament, you have to take an oath of office. You have to take an oath. And the oath had a recognition of the existence of God. And he said, oh, I'm an atheist, I don't want to take this oath. He said, no oath, no Member of Parliament. So he could not become a Member of Parliament. Then what happens? Another election. Again, the same story. He is asked to take the oath and he says, I cannot because I'm an atheist, and Parliament will not agree that he should then become a Member of Parliament. 5 times he was sent back from Parliament. 5 times there were elections in the UK to elect Charles Bradlaugh. Finally he got tired. He said, I've been elected 5 times. The people of my constituency actually want me to represent them. He said, okay, all right, I will take the oath in the name of God. Then Parliament said, no, you can't because you're an atheist. Finally they allowed him, and he was one of the great MPs. He was then called the MP for India because he fought for the independence of peoples from colonial power. One of the first who did it from the United Kingdom, from England. Right. Freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, freedom of belief. These are the areas which are impacted by a connection between religion and state. If the state is an atheist state, it affects the rights of the religious people. If the state is religious, then it affects the rights of those who are non-religious. Or it creates privileges for people, which ought not to be the case. In the United Kingdom, 12 members of the House of Lords are elected simply because they are leaders of the church. When secularists have been objecting to this, what they said is, all right, we'll create seats also for the Muslims and also for the Hindus and so on. These are unelected people. What is the mechanism that you will use to keep these people in Parliament? This is a serious problem. That religion is refusing to let go of the privileges given to it, even though religion itself is against democracy. Now, these are the challenges of an evolving society. But most societies have managed to get rid of the excessive influence and the privileges that religion demands in a democratic system. Okay, now they have been trying, especially in the Islamic countries, to stop anyone from criticizing anything that they consider holy in their religion. This meant, as in the case of my own friend, Dr. Yunus Sheikh, being given the death penalty because apparently he made a comment, not obscene, not actually even untrue, about the Prophet of Islam, Prophet Muhammad. And because he is believed to have said something, they gave him the death penalty. Why should you not say something about a religion? What is this special privilege that says you can say anything about politics, you can say anything about anything, but you cannot make a comment about a religious person? They say it affects our sentiments, manobhaval. What is this manobhaval? Are you a child? Do you want to cry every time I say something? Or do you want to be a mature democracy and understand what the source of that criticism is? Every attempt to reform society has been met with a plea, a cry, weeping people, saying our rights are being damaged. When they said no sati, the whole population which was in favor of sati rose in unison and said the Christians are interfering with our religion. When they brought in the Sarada Act early 1900s saying you should not marry your children, babies, before they turn 16, 18, it was 13 with the Sarada Act. They said you are interfering with our religion. When Dr. Ambedkar brought in this the idea of the Hindu code, People were very angry, saying, this man, and he's untouchable, worst thing of all, he is interfering with how caste Hindus would have their family relations. The anger many people have with Nehru and Ambedkar is because they feel offended that these two people interfered with their personal law. But we know what that reform in personal law has done to Hindu communities and societies, especially the women. It made the lives of the community better. The same resistance that Islamic communities are offering today is a resistance that once existed in the Hindu community as well. So we have to understand the objection for what it is. And what it is an unjust attempt to perpetuate a privilege that is not theirs, not lawfully. If you say it is my religion, women cannot come into a temple during their menstrual period, or during the age when women are likely to have their periods. What nonsense is that? And how dare they say that? And yet they are able to do that, say that, make that claim for a special consideration in the name of religion. So the cloak and the veil of religion for the perpetuation of injustice and fighting with human rights is really an affront to the achievements of modern democracy. And we have to stop it. We have to fight it. If you say you're an untouchable, you cannot come into the temple because my God's caste is different from your caste, it cannot be accepted. You call it religion, you call it political ideology, and it is not right that then you say, my religious sentiments are hurt. If your religious sentiments and your beliefs are hurt, when I speak human rights, change your beliefs. Go reflect and change your beliefs. Or accept that the criminal law will take care of your discrimination against humans. There should be no compromise on the question of human rights. And that is not possible if you have religion decide what is moral, what is immoral, what is legal, and what is not. The attempt of the Islamic countries to impose a blasphemy law in their own countries has been expanded to bring it to the United Nations, so that they are asking all countries of the world to now accept that there can be no criticism of any religion anywhere. And why should there not be any criticism? It is not abuse we are talking about. We are not insulting the believer. We are making the people who say that their religion is moral accountable to their claims. And we are making them accountable to the universal standards of human rights that have now been a common consensus for the world in most countries anyway. And then there are trends in religion. Sweden has decided and declared that it will dissociate the state from the church. Now this is a fantastic development. In India we are told, in all of Europe there are religious states. Of course, Portugal does not have a religious state. France does not have a religious state. But most of the other countries have a religious state. The Queen of England is also head of the Church of England, and so on and so forth. But Sweden made the decision that the church, the Lutheran Church, will not be the official state religion anymore, and that phasing out will happen over years. Norway is being pressurized to act like that. So countries around the world, except for the Islamic world, are actually saying, we don't want religion to decide what our people should be doing or believing or acting as, and so on. And then of course the fact remains that in many countries in Europe, many people have now said that they are not religious. In Holland, the majority of the people say they are not religious. In Iceland, they have said it. In Belgium, it is close to that. In many countries of Western Europe, you will see that the churches are being rented out for discotheques on weekends because they do not have the money to pay for the heating, because those churches do not have enough people come in or give contributions. So the trends in the world are of this kind. There are 2.9 billion Christians in the world, or 290 crores. There are 150 crores of Muslims, that's 1.5 billion. And the nuns, not the N-U-N, but the N-O-N-E. I have no God, I have no religion. The nuns are 1.3 billion. Then come the Hindus at 900 million or 90 crores or 0.9 million. So the number of people who have said, I don't need a religion, I don't want a God to tell me how to behave morally, ethically, in a responsible manner vis-a-vis my fellow citizens, has been increasing. And there are trends and changes which are reflecting these changes in the way we believe. Of course, you know that in Nepal, they have already declared a secular constitution in Nepal. It is a diluted secularism. It has privilege, or at least advantage, given to the Hindus. But that is where that is. Let us see these trends and see what is happening in those societies. In those societies, human rights, human values, and human solidarity has become more privileged than it was earlier. This is a lesson for us. The progressive disentanglement of religion from the state, the establishment of a secular concept of human rights, the idea of universal human values is changing the way human relations are shaped. That is a great achievement of the secular system. It creates an equal society. It does not create an atheist society, no. It should not have an atheist state, absolutely not. The state is a political organization of society, and it has no business telling you or me or anyone else what to believe, what not to believe, what to eat and what not to eat, or to go into Akhlaq's refrigerator and see whether that is beef or whether it is goat. You can have a larger discussion about vegetarianism or non-vegetarianism. But your religious taboo cannot be imposed on a person in a society. Now, these are the things that are of practical consequence. What you eat, what you drink, how you dream, and what you dream, and the color of your dreams. These are being sought to be decided by the religious people. Please keep in mind, and do not forget, that no religion is immune to what has happened to Europe during the Dark Ages, or what is happening in Islamic societies around the world. Because that is the nature of this entanglement of religion and state. We talk about the Taliban. We talk about ISIS. Who was the original Taliban? The original Taliban is the Catholic Church. The church which killed 50,000 women, calling them witches. The Afghans, the Iranians, and the Syrians have not come to 50,000 yet. The church killed them, calling them witches. But with the humanization of their thinking, that changed. With the progressive reduction of the influence of the church on education, on the political structure, and on morality, those societies became more civilized. For that to happen, they needed an enlightenment. The enlightenment is the bringing to the center of human society and human affairs the primal role of reason, of verifiable claims to truth, and the institution of human rights as the guiding principles of those societies. Have they not done wrong things? Many. Have they not established colonial societies around the world? Yes, sadly so. But that should not be allowed to affect the principle of justice on which that system is based. Today, if you look at Western Europe as an example, within the country there is great respect and following of human rights. The abuses of human rights by many powerful Western countries is outside their country, not inside. And that tells us something. To the extent that countries and peoples are conscious and they are made aware of the importance of rights and values and freedoms and rational thinking which keeps away superstition, to that extent that society will be elevated. That is why we need secularism. And that is why we'll have to come back to you. And that is why we need to get rid of all laws which prevent us from thinking in the way we would like to. After all, if you say something and it hurts you, nobody has obliged you to continue to listen to me. Nobody has obliged you to buy a book and read it and keep it with you. If you don't like it, you can throw it away. Nobody has obliged you to watch a TV program that you don't like. There is what is called a remote control. Change the channel. Don't tell me what I should not say. You decide for yourself what you want to listen to. I had this big discussion. I went with my then 8-year-old son to a TV discussion. It was in Telugu. It was about banning of books. Went for 45 minutes with a senior police officer who retired, with a politician and myself. At the end of the discussion, the anchor who saw my son just watching this discussion in a language which is not his language at school, a bit bored, and she asked him, how do you like this discussion? And he said, it's very boring. You don't like to see something, just change the channel. He was 8 years old. Many of the grown-ups who are objecting to what others have said because they are exercising their free speech are not as grown up as this 8-year-old child. Don't like something, don't do it. Don't like a book, pay for it, bring it, burn it, it's all right. But don't burn what is not yours. Don't burn what you have not purchased yourself. Well, this is a way in which we would make more space for people to think for themselves without interfering with their freedom of conscience. Remember that it is not only the religious people who have rights. As a non-religious, atheist, human rights activist, I have rights too. And I do not want to be offended by your backward claims that women and men are not the same, that minorities will not have the rights that the majority has, or any other fanciful thing that you will say as an offense to those who do not agree with you. Everyone has rights. Now, look at this. This is so damaging to the Indian Republic. You had already Article 51AH, which asks all citizens of the country to promote humanism, the spirit of social reform, and the scientific temper. So when the High Court building in Gujarat was inaugurated with prayers, a lawyer went to court saying the High Court exceeded its limits because the High Court actually violated the secular principles by performing puja. And you know what the court said? The court said, but puja is secular. Now, what kind of perverted definition or interpretation of the word puja would be to say that a prayer is secular? But the court has said that. And fined him 20,000 rupees for wasting the court's time. Then we have, there is a popular lie that is going around in the country that the Supreme Court of India has allowed Vastu and Jyotisham, which we will deal with in the second half of our discussions, as scientific. Actually, it did not say anything like that. But based on a misunderstanding of that judgment, the High Court of Mumbai said Vastu and Jyotisham are accepted that they were ancient sciences. Now tell me one thing, can a science be ancient? Yesterday's science today has been revised or rejected already. Tens of thousands of people are investigating into the nature of the universe and finding new facts and saying, that's not right. I don't want to accept it as the truth anymore. Nobody anymore says that Galileo is right. Galileo has clearly given us an idea, as Copernicus did, that the sun was at the center, but not the center of the universe, simply the center of the solar system. Now, you needed a Kepler and you needed others to tell us more things. And science embraced all that, and it moved on. And that is the strength of science. How can a court come and tell you that ancient sciences cannot be changed, or they cannot be challenged or regulated? But the court has done that. And then of course there's a uniform civil code which nobody wants to bring in because they don't want to offend a major voting bloc. And there is the reservation for women. They don't want to either implement that since 1994 or 96. That's nearly 2016 now. So 20 years into the legislative process, and they have still not brought in the legislation. We are told often that Bangladesh is a Muslim country. There is a debate right now going on in England where the Prime Minister also said that Britain is a Christian country. How? In what way? Is it because an undemocratically elected or appointed monarchy is ahead of an undemocratic church system? How is it that the country is Christian? The statistics show that not all people in Britain actually believe in Christianity. Many have rejected it. I mentioned to you the case of the Netherlands. The Netherlands has a royal family, they are Christian, the country says it is Christian, but the citizens are not Christian. The majority of the citizens have said, we are not Christian, we are humanists, they said. But why should a country have an identity based on religion? And the same logic applies when someone says that India is a Hindu country. Well, with a country which has so many other non-Hindus, how can you call that country a particular religious identity-wise? It's not possible. Now, these are the principles. I'm coming to the end of what I would like to throw open to you for discussion, that the sphere of religion is private and the sphere of politics is public. And we should not let these two overlap, because that would be to the detriment of a democratic system and a democratic atmosphere in the country. And then the state is a political organization, and it is not the religious organization of a society, which is why it would be wrong for a state to promote either going to a particular temple or declaring it to be a holy city, like there are proposals to do in the case of some cities in India, or to promote the dipping of people into muddy waters of rivers. The task of the state might be to clean the river rather than ask people to go and dip themselves in the dirty water of the river. One is its function, which is legitimate to perform an environmental function. The other is interfering or promoting a particular religious practice, which is that of pushkaras. Now, as I pointed out, we are moving from religious identities to actually a secular identity based entirely on humanity and humanism and human rights. I think I should more or less wrap our discussion, my part of the discussion here, but I will say we should do it after looking at what the great Amartya Sen has said. Now, Amartya Sen is important not only because of the fact that he got a Nobel Prize and in economics and so on. He has made in recent times important contributions to the idea of India itself. Now look at this. He says it's bizarre, it's strange, it's weird that anyone should say that India has a particular religion. Because he points out that Islam in India is older than Christianity is in many parts of Europe. And you also know that Christianity came to India much before it went to Europe. That was the way in which religions developed and spread themselves. And then of course, if you say India is a Hindu country, which Hinduism is that? Because there's no one single Hinduism. There are many, 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 all of which is called Hindu. And then you will allow some people to define what is Hindu and what is not. That is interference by the state in the Hindu religion itself. Forget the minorities also. Now, and then of course not to forget that the Charvakas, they had no religion. The Lokayatas, they didn't have any. And not to forget, of course, the great Buddha, who was born in an era when people were asking and talking about the existence of God and even rejecting God. And the greatness of the Buddha was that he said that we should not waste our time in investigating God, because that's an answer we can't really find. But he also proposed something else which makes him unique in the history of moral philosophy. For the first time in the history of the world, here was one man who said that you can be moral without any reference to God. The Eightfold Path, the Noble Truths do not refer to God, do not refer to religion. And he offered a way for people to be moral without invoking the supernatural. That is his great contribution. Incidentally, the Buddha was not born in India, he's a Nepali. He died in India. He did most of his work as a migrant in what is today's India, but his origins are not in India, the neighboring country. And then I found this very interesting. Often people are saying, the religious sentiments of my community are affected. So the question was, is this country made of citizens or communities? It's an important question to ask. Is it a federation of, or a confederation of different religions, or is it a geography in which there are individuals living? Is the primary membership of India through a religion or through citizenship? The primary membership of India is only through citizenship, and that does not admit of any individual identity of religion or a collective identity of religion. For that, we have to assert some important principles again, that human rights belong to individuals, not to communities. And the duty of the state is to keep away from religions, not to promote them, and to promote the welfare of citizens, not to promote the richness and the wealth of particular religious groups. And then, in Bangladesh, if you're born a Muslim. In Saudi Arabia, if you're born a Muslim. In countries like ours, you have a choice still of which religion you want to belong to, or no religion if you have rejected all of them. And that reminds us that we are not properties of the state. We don't belong to the state. We actually legitimize the state by our consent to its governing us. And this is the ideas I want to leave you with, that this is what secularism implies. It is about freedom of conscience, so that all citizens have an equal playing field. All citizens can explore the domain of ethics, or God, or atheism. But if you don't protect it, it will go away. It will go away because our people are not secular. in a country where the society is religious, the dangers to the secular state are manifold. And if the citizens are not conscious, they will not be able to protect it at all. I shall leave you with these words. Thank you very much.